Still restarting. Good morning. I will call to order today's regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee. Today is Thursday. No, it's not. Today is Thursday, May 15th, 2014. We have a quorum. I'm Lisa Bender. I'm the chair of the committee, and I'm joined by council members Reich, Goodman, and Johnson. We have 4 items on today's agenda. The first item is a public hearing, and we'll return to that one in a moment. The consent agenda has 3 items. So item number 2 is an application submitted by Baker Daniels, LLP, on behalf of LaRive Condominium to vacate part of a utility easement at the property of 110 Bank Street to allow ground-level mechanical equipment additions. Item number 3 has 3 parts. It's an application by Leonard Street and Denard on behalf of the Upper Midwest Oregon Procurement Organization for vacation of multiple drainage and utility easements for the property located at 2225 and 2313 West River Road North and 70 North 22nd Avenue, subject to a new easement for city utilities to be provided. The second part is to authorize the appropriate city officials and staff to execute the final utility easement relocation and construction agreement. And the third part is to authorize the appropriate city officials and staff to execute and record the declaration of drainage and utility easements. And the item number 4 is a petition filed by Tyrone Folliard on behalf of Encaustic LLC to rezone the property located at 1401 Marshall Street Northeast from R3 to C1 to allow for a catering business, occasional restaurant, and an addition, and to modify the 2013 City Planning Commission condition of approval. And that's for the Chow Girls catering business. So with that, are there any questions or comments about the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll move those 3 items. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Those 3 items carry. Then we'll return to the public hearing, which is item number 1. This is an appeal submitted by Diane Hofstad on behalf of a group of people of the decision of the City Planning Commission to approve a conditional use permit and site plan review to allow for a liquor store at the property located at 80 Broadway Street Northeast. So we'll start with the staff report.
Good morning, Chair Bender, committee members. The item before you is an appeal of the decision of the Planning Commission to approve a liquor store at 80 Broadway Street Northeast. The proposal is for a new 1-story, 7,500 square foot building in which the liquor store would be located. So the site plan that's before you shows a new building located up to the corner of Broadway Street and Marshall Street. The site also has frontage along 11th Avenue Northeast, and that's where the parking area would be located. The main entrances, one would face the parking area and one would also face the corner of Broadway and Marshall. There are 15 parking spaces proposed. They also have some bike parking proposed in the right-of-way. And here for reference, you can see a rendering. This would be the view from Marshall Street looking northward. This site is Zone C2. A liquor store is allowed there as a conditional use, and conditional use is an allowed use in the zoning district upon demonstrating that such use will comply with all the conditions and standards of the zoning ordinance. So they do need the conditional use permit, and because this is a new construction project, site plan review is also required. The site is located on the southeast corner of Broadway and Marshall, and this area is mixed use. There's a bank on one corner, a library on another, and the surface parking lot for Graco on the remaining corner. To the south of the site, across 11th Avenue, there's also a bar, and then directly east is a restaurant, and then kind of more further east, it's low-density residential. The comprehensive plan calls for mixed use as a future land use of the site, and just for reference, mixed use can mean a mixed-use building or a mixed-use area. It doesn't necessarily mean that the building itself has to be mixed-use. Broadway and Marshall, those are the primary corridors. They are community corridors. This site is located in an activity center that focuses around the Greenbelt complex. And these land use designations do support commercial development at this location. The site isn't located within the boundaries of any small area plans that have been adopted. That includes the above the falls small area plan, but that plan does talk about improvements for Marshall. It calls for making it more like a parkway. At the public hearing, at the Planning Commission meeting, there were some public concerns that were raised about this development impacting those improvements to Marshall Street, which could include bike lanes and more landscaping like boulevards. And Marshall is a county road. It's also a truck route. In 2003, the county did complete a plan for Marshall that looked at making these improvements to Marshall that were called for in the small area plan. And one of the issues that's noted is that there are areas of Marshall Street that are narrower. Here we have a width of 80 feet, so this is one of the wider sections. And those narrower locations, there are some issues with obtaining or, implementing more of these improvements. But here we have a situation where it's 80 feet. We also have other buildings that are built up to the property line along Marshall. The sidewalk here is 14 feet wide. So when we were looking at this, we didn't identify any issues of having the building located up to the street.
Could I ask a question while you have the map there still? So I think there's a desire to have bicycle lanes. We got several communications about the bicycle facilities, on-street bicycle lanes, but then there's also a trail nearby. But I believe that is not on the street corridor. But could you verify that and talk about the bike path?
Sure, Chair Bender. The plan does call for acquiring more property along the river side of Marshall Street, so on the west side. And in those locations, it does talk about like an off-street trail for bikes and pedestrians, and also having some on-street bike trails. But again, that's to the west side of Marshall. It won't be affecting this side. And also note that property acquisition would be very costly. So the plans indicated that acquiring property on the east side would be less likely. And there are currently no plans to acquire property and widen the street right now. Another public concern that was raised at the public hearing was having the curb cut along Marshall Street. They do have 2 curb cuts proposed. And Public Works, looked at this proposal. They did not have any concerns with the Marshall Street access. They're not objecting to it. They did object to having a curb cut on Broadway and said that would not be allowed. Broadway has very high traffic volumes, and when they compared the two, they just didn't see the same level of safety concerns between Marshall and Broadway. For the site plan review, some alternative compliance was requested. First of all, the building placement. The building is located about 50 feet from 11th Avenue with the parking located in between. But as I mentioned before, we didn't see any issues with having the building up to the corner. Broadway and Marshall are the more prominent streets here where we'd like to see this building located. And the Planning Commission did add a condition of approval that the entrance focused on the intersection there have more enhancements, both architecturally and with landscaping. There's an alternative compliance request for the windows. That would be along Broadway, the Broadway elevation, which is the top elevation on your screens. They were proposing to do 17.3% windows on that side, and with that being a primary frontage, we wanted to see them meet the 30% windows. On the floor plan, they were showing that there would be coolers along that wall. We indicated that we thought they could relocate those to another wall, possibly the parking lot side. And with that in mind, we did say we wanted 30% windows along Broadway, but then we would allow slightly less along the parking lot side down to 25% if needed. And the applicant was agreeable to that. Related to the storage locations, again, along the parking lot side, they're asking for alternative compliance for the amount of non-active spaces facing a street. Again, the parking lot side does face 11th and is the less prominent side, and they're asking for 36% non-active uses. Normally 30% is the limit. But given that it has sides or frontage on 3 streets, we thought that was reasonable. The other requests for alternative compliance were related to landscaping. First, the general requirement of 20% was not being met. They're at 17%. They're also asking for an exception along 11th Avenue where they need a 7-foot landscaped yard. They're providing about 2 feet on the property, and the rest would be provided in 11th Avenue. And then lastly, they were deficient on the total number of trees. So what they proposed to do to address that as an alternative was to, as I mentioned, provide more landscaping along here where there currently is none in the 11th Avenue right-of-way. And through the staff recommendation, we're requesting that they add more trees, 1 more along Broadway, the 2 that are proposed along Marshall, and then a couple more along 11th. Currently around the site we have no trees, so this will be a big improvement. And the Planning Commission did concur with those conditions. For the conditions permit findings, the ones that we haven't addressed yet, we did find that the proposed use is not expected to be detrimental to the public health, safety, or general welfare, and should not impede the normal and orderly development of surrounding properties. It'll also need to comply with all licensing requirements, like safety ordinances and public works standards. The applicant did meet with licensing to verify that they are properly spaced from all the uses that they need to be spaced from. So spacing or location would be allowed. Again, Public Works has reviewed the site and has not identified any major issues. By adding additional windows, we think any safety concerns will be addressed. With the parking, they are required to have 14 spaces. They're providing 15. Their bicycle parking requirement is 4, and they were proposing to provide 4, but then the Planning Commission did add a condition that they provide 15. For loading and deliveries, they mentioned that they will be making those during off-peak times. So that should have less of an impact on traffic on 11th and Marshall. So we found that they would conform with all the applicable regulations of the zoning district of this site that the site is located in. So the staff recommended approval of both applications, and the Planning Commission concurred and just added the 2 conditions that I mentioned. I can take any questions now.
Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. Fusey, and what's in front of us today is really a question about whether or not a building should go on this location in a C2, regardless of use. It could be any C2 use, for example. Isn't that correct?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Goodman, I'd concur with that statement.
So this isn't really about what the actual use is. It's about a building. So now I want to get to the building point of view. The Planning Commission was unanimous in their decision that a building like this with these conditions could go in that location. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And there is no small area plan saying that a building shouldn't go in this location. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And there are some requirements that they exceed, but some that they don't. The greening, for example, which perhaps we'll hear about, and maybe if there's a concern about it, we'll fix that. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And then conditional use means allowed with conditions. Isn't that correct, Mr. Fusey?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Goodman, it is an allowable use within the district so long as it complies with all of the standards, which the staff report has concluded that it does.
So really what we ought to be hearing about today is the site plan concerns. What is it about the site plan that folks don't like, and how can we improve on the work of the Planning Commission if there is in fact any work to improve on? Isn't that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And acknowledging that all of that is the confines of our decision here today, I'm just curious how many square feet the site is?
The site is, I'm going to say 16,600. It's just under 17,000.
Okay, wow, okay. So I know I'm working with a liquor store owner in my ward on a site where there would be residential above as well. And I would just say, obviously, since we can't make our decision based off of the density issue here today and just whether or not a building's allowed on that site, I would just put a bug in the owner's ears that, you know, if you can diversify and get more money coming in from rents as well, I would hope you would consider adding some density, which would be a positive thing for the city, and still be able to have your business on the first floor. So thank you.
Did you want to respond? We did have some discussion about adding a mixed-use building on the site, which obviously isn't required by our current zoning, but one of the planning commissioners, who's an architect, pointed out that parking would be very difficult on a lot of this size, so that if there was a larger building, that it would likely have to have very little parking. But you were there as well.
Yes, I don't know if I have much to add to that. Given the small size of the site and its odd shape, doing a mixed-use building here would probably be more of a challenge. The site plan that's before you is meeting its parking requirement. They would have one extra parking space, so potentially one dwelling unit could be added to the site and without needing a parking variance. So it is a challenging site. But yeah, the comprehensive plan, this would still fit in with that as is.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, why don't we hear from the applicant first and then move to the appellant before opening the public hearing?
Madam Chairperson, council members, my name is Thomas Harlan. I'm the attorney for the applicant from Madigan, Dahl, and Harlan. And we want to first off thank the Planning Commission for their support, their questions, their concerns, the conditions that were put on this. We're willing to work with the city. We're willing to work with the city staff to make sure that this is a welcome development. Also want to thank the city staff for all the work that they've done, and we look forward to continuing to work with them to address any issues that are raised by the city or any of the residents. We're requesting that the city consistently apply its zoning ordinances and approve with conditions this particular application. We believe it conforms with the zoning. We believe it is one of the best uses for this particular property. With respect to the project, we've got Scott Nelson from DJR Architects that's going to address a lot of those, but I want to just touch on a few points. First, this site, and I think everybody can agree, the site is underutilized. As it currently exists, if everybody can say that this is a gateway into the northeast area, certainly this site is not what the city would like to present as something going in. So I think that that's a common ground on which everybody can agree. The proposal before you conforms, like I said, conforms to the use subject to conditions. And what's important is that we start to address a little bit of what the vision should be, even though there are a series of questions about what properly is before the committee today. This naturally bleeds over a little bit, and so I think it's important that you guys get a flavor of that. Yes, indeed, it is going to be proposed to be a liquor store, but it's a different kind of liquor store. It's going to be a neighborhood liquor store. It's not going to be a big box suburban liquor store that is going to be running ads in the Star and Tribune or on any of the local radio stations. It's a small neighborhood liquor store. It's going to be dog friendly. It's going to be bike friendly. That's part of what some of the discussions that we had with city staff and with the Planning Commission. There's an increase with respect to bikes. It's going to be pedestrian friendly. The goal is to minimize the impact, and we're going to do that by coordinating deliveries, as we talked about. With traffic, we've backed away from the curb cut coming in off Broadway. And again, this is not going to be a destination, so you're not going to see the big, rush in or rush out, to beat the best price or to do anything along those lines. It's a neighborhood piece. What's also important, it's going to maximize the blend, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. So in other words, what it's pulling from are what's around it. For example, the Grainbelt Brewery just across the street, there's certain, certain architectural features that are being pulled into this building. And it's very important so that even though it is 7,500 square feet, there's, discussions about whether it can be mixed use or not. And again, I'll defer to the architect on that. This is not a minimum build. This is a significant investment into a store that is going to blend into the particular area. It's a vibrant area, as you know. This is an area that's constantly getting more and more infusion in the city. I'm hopeful we'll see the benefit in this and can understand that it's important. What's also important is this is actually coming from already a business family in the city. So this is a family that's a third generation liquor store family, and this is going to be an investment into the community, back into the community. They understand how to run a liquor store. They understand the concept of a neighborhood liquor store, and they believe that this works. As as city staff, as Janelle indicated, that this is a conforming use. It does fit within all the requirements. Before you, though, is an appeal, and I would point out that really, as you look through and listen to this appeal, you'll note that there's really nothing new. There's nothing new that's going to be presented here today. The same arguments were presented before the Planning Commission, and I invite you to read those particular, if you get an opportunity, read the transcript from that and read some of the comments at the close of a public hearing, some of the comments by the commissioners as it relates to the concerns raised during that time frame. You'll find that they're enlightening and were already weighed and considered. Lastly, I passed out to you all some local press May 8th article that talks about some of the different community concerns about this particular build, about this liquor store going in. And this is just my observation. As I read that, I wondered, really, is this about the merits of this particular piece, or is there something different? It seemed to be as much political and possibly setting up another political run rather than discussing the true merits of this particular application. So what we're here to do today is to ask this body to essentially deny the appeal, uphold the permit with the conditional use requirements, and to deny the appeal. Deny the appeal. Uphold the permit with the conditional use requirements. Any questions?
Any questions? No, thank you. Is there anyone else from the applicants?
Yes, there is. Thank you.
Sure.
Good morning, Chair Bender and Commission members. My name is Scott Nelson. I'm the architect from DJR Architecture. I've been working with Jason on the store for several months, and with Janelle and the city staff and with Public Works for a long time. We really appreciate the input that they've had throughout this. We can't emphasize enough how important this project is as a gateway to the Northeast and the community, and how much we've tried to make it in its design as a unique building, a unique spot, a neighborhood store. It's a very challenging site, as the Planning Commission noted a couple times, trying to make a mixed use on this would be very difficult. As a 16,000 square foot footprint with a very strange shape and a slope of 6 feet from east to west, it'd be very difficult. The use we're proposing with a design that's very distinctive. It's not a single multi-tenant type of facility. It's a very specific design made for this community, made to be the individual liquor store and retailer that it is, and something that's friendly, works with bikers, works with pedestrians. It's not just, as Tom mentioned, an in-and-out big box liquor retailer. We've been careful to try and address the street, and we're more than okay with all of the conditions that the planning Planning staff recommended flipping our retailing from one side to another to increase the windows on the Broadway side, which will actually look a little bit more like the parking lot side that's shown on our rendering right now. And increase, I think we're adding 4 trees and some additional landscaping. Again, as Janelle said, there's virtually no landscaping on this site right now. With the work we'll do with this completed project, it'll be landscaped on 4 sides. So, are there any questions about the proposal? Because I know you mentioned this, we're really talking about the building here as well.
Any questions? Nope. I think we're good. Thank you very much for the presentation. Would the appellant like to speak? Okay, otherwise I can open the public hearing, and we have 10 people signed up to speak. We have the timer today, and we ask that people would keep their remarks to 2 minutes, and to please keep your comments directed at the question before us today, which is, should a building be built at this site? And then if you have any additional comments about the specifics of the site plan review. Thank you. And Edna's
Yes, Chair Bender, members of the committee, I am Edna Brasidas from 4 Grove Street, and I'm speaking for Friends of the Riverfront. It's a Minnesota nonprofit that's work is to enhance the central riverfront area, which is just south of this particular site. And I'm here today just to talk about one thing: safety at the intersection of Broadway and Marshall. And safety is a condition, that you have to make a finding that the proposed development would be safe in order to issue a CUP. I am really proud of Minneapolis Public Works for issuing what I consider one of the best reports I've ever read. It takes data, does analysis, and came out with some conclusions. It said that what we need to do is to work to reduce bicycle crashes. And of course, safety is always important. But they said there's other reasons to do that, because we want to grow the city. And in order to do that, we want to increase the non-motorized transportation. And we need to get people like me who are interested but concerned to feel that the places are safe where we're going to ride. And the 3 primary conclusions emerge from the data. Most crashes are occurring at intersections along major arterials. Motorists are not seeing or yielding to bicyclists, and bicycles, I can't say it, are not riding in a predictable manner. Bottom line, for safety, we need to focus on intersections. 81% of crashes occur at or nearby intersections. And 41% at the intersection and 40% within 50 feet of the intersection. So we need to look at an intersection. And so what are the particular safety concerns at this intersection? In the report, Broadway and Marshall is cited as a challenge intersection. Broadway is in the category of roads with the highest rates of accidents. As staff testified, Broadway is a truck route. There are heavy vehicles on this road, and that corresponds to fatalities.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, we have Liz Walensky, and then Mary McGuire.
Could I have some extra time, because I don't think you have to look at the intersection. And this is not testimony that was given at the public hearing.
The time is up, and we need to keep everyone to the 2 minutes. Yeah, but please submit all the materials to the clerk, and we've seen several maps of the area as well.
Well, I don't think you've seen this map. And in this map, you can see where the crossings go across the road, and they're at an angle. And you can also see that development has allowed open space at the corners, so you have better sight lines. This particular corner here is going to be dangerous.
Okay, thank you for your testimony.
Well, one more thing.
Ms. Walensky.
I'm just going to say that there is a bike path.
Ma'am, in order to be fair to everyone, we have to keep everyone to 2 minutes. Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Lewinsky is next, and then we have Mary McGuire, Mike Reed, Lisa Hondros, Bill Wittrak. Thank you. And please do give the materials to the clerk, and they'll be entered into the public record.
Let me get this up here. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Liz Walensky. I live at 3519 2nd Street Northeast. I'm here as the East Side Park Commissioner, not as the Commissioner, the President of the Park Board, but as the East Side Commissioner here to represent my constituency. The Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board has been in existence for 131 years, and we are very fond, as many of you know, of big plans. This is the book by Theodore Wirth. We've had Cleveland come through. We've got giant plans for this area. One of the big things that Professor Cleveland said as he advocated purchasing the original park board lands were, in his recommendations, Professor Cleveland advocated that both banks of the river be acquired to the city limits. Well, we haven't been very successful in getting both banks, particularly on the east and north sides. And for equity purposes, that's been one of the park board's biggest things right now. Another thing is from the Above the Falls Master Plan, Chapter 7, page 159, under points and under transportation. 7, support strategies to enhance the attractiveness and safety of the Riverway street system. Because Northeast Minneapolis was at one time very industrial, we have not been able to have the parkway system that we have in South Minneapolis. But we of the Park Board have made giant investments over time to create these systems that make great roadways. And so we have now West River Road that goes through this downtown and has provided a ton of development there that has, with small public investment, has increased and gotten a lot of huge public investment. There's a category there that shows what many of you know are the facts about, investing millions to get billions in return. Again, the east side, we're not going to be able to get right up to the river. There's too much stuff going on there already. We're trying hard. But because of that, what has been designated as the parkway for the northeast side along the river has been Marshall Street. I don't see any liquor stores on Victory Memorial Parkway. I don't see any liquor stores around Lake of the Isles. Yes, and again, here we're looking at the east side, once again, getting less because we're the east side. This area could be zoned residential should the city choose to do so. Even if it's mixed use with some mixed use residential on the top, that's better than not having a liquor store. All I'm saying is as the park system has gone into place, what we have tried to do is provide parkway-like amenities that have provided really great amenities for the public along our areas, and we would like to continue to have our parkways look parkway-like. Marshall Street is in the future to be the parkway for Northeast. So thank you for your time. I won't do any more except to say one thing. Gil Penalosa was here last week. Minneapolis Park System is considered the #1 park system in the USA right now. He said it's hard to go from good to great. These are the kind of decisions that make our park system go from good to great.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mrs. McGuire? And then we'll have Mike Reed, Lisa Hondros, Bill Wittrock.
Morning, committee members. My name is Mary Jamin McGuire. I live at 2641 Marshall Street Northeast, and I'm here representing the Above the Falls Citizens Advisory Committee. Marshall Street Northeast, East River Road is a historic road and a significant route through the city of Minneapolis. It's not an accident that it's alongside the Mississippi River and within the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, our own national park. Marshall Street has had many names and purposes over the past 200 years, beginning probably as an Indian trail, then becoming the Red River Oxcart Trail, and is a significant and is designated as the Great River Road. It's currently a significant gap in the Grand Rounds and the Mississippi River Trail, a new designated trail which is 3,000 miles of bikeways from Lake Itasca to New Orleans. This will be an asset to the city and the region and could lead to increased tourism if handled in the right way. There is already funding available for businesses along the MRT to advertise to the bicyclists using the trail. And they're aiming at restaurants, hotels, bike repair shops, coffee shops, theaters, museums, baseball stadiums, etc. The Above the Falls plan calls for Marshall Street Northeast to be redesigned as a landscape boulevard. You have a copy of this, so I'm going to skip through it a little quickly. River First also talks about it as a continuous bike and pedestrians trail. This would perfectly dovetail with the design for the MRT. And we need to specifically design these bike trails before any developments, such as the liquor store, are approved. The River First plan and Above the Falls and other city plans also talk about development along the trail. The plan does not support the park development, reflect the unique urban identity, or maximize the neighborhood connections to the Mississippi River. In fact, this development would detract from the plan for the plans from this area and make it more difficult to implement. It's not enough just to have the bike trails. It's critical to include the parkway-like amenities and development that will enhance the experience of living or traveling adjacent to one of the greatest rivers in the world. It's time for Minneapolis to recognize the importance of the Mississippi River to the city of Minneapolis, both for residents and visitors, and to implement these plans, some of which extend back to the late 1800s.
Thank you.
Time.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Reed, then Lisa Hondros, Bill Wittruck, and Tony Hofstad.
I signed it accidentally as I walked.
Oh, okay, no problem. Lisa Hondros.
Good morning. I'll try to be quick. As you know, the approval of the conditional use permits requires a finding that it's consistent with the applicable policies of the comprehensive plan. And we also heard that this is part of the Greenbelt Complex Activity Center, which the plan only identifies 18 activity centers in the city of Minneapolis, including Uptown and Cedar Riverside. They're places that shape the urban identity. And they are very specific. I guess I disagree with the staff's conclusion that it is consistent with those, and I will go through why. Well, I don't know if you can see this, but if you look through the policy, the very first one, encourage a variety of commercial and residential uses that generate activity all day long and into the evening. True enough, this is the only one cited by staff. True enough, a liquor store adds a new use. I don't know that it contributes to all day long into the evening. I don't know the hours, but I suspect the bank, the library, the things are open, and later in the evening is more like a restaurant or something open later at night. Next down, encourage mixed-use buildings with commercial uses located on the ground floor. No, this is a single use. Encourage active uses on the ground floor of buildings and activity centers. Again, no, because a ground floor implies that the building has more than one floor. Discourage uses that diminish the transit, pedestrian character, automotive services. No, this has a surface parking lot, and you've heard a little bit from others about the negative impacts on the transit and pedestrian character in the parks. Encourage a height of at least 2 stories for new buildings. No, again, this is 1 story. Encourage the development of very high density housing. No, this is low density. Encourage the development of medium to high density housing immediately adjacent. I'm not sure that is applicable here. I don't know that this particular project would be a magnet to housing. Support district parking strategies, included shared parking facilities, none that I'm aware of. Encourage architectural design and building massing and site plans to create improved public and semi-public spaces. Again, none that I'm aware of. Encourage developments to incorporate climate-sensitive site and building design practice, none that I'm aware of. So if you read the activity center policies as a whole, you can see that this type of development is almost exactly the opposite of what is envisioned. And if this project is considered consistent with this plan, I don't know what wouldn't be.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Mr. Wittruck? And then Mr. Hofstad, Patrick Griffin, and Beth Griffin.
Good morning. I'm Bill Whitrock with RSP Architects, 1220 Marshall Street. I'm a senior associate, and I'm representing RSP Architects. We're technically in the Sheridan neighborhood, but right at the corner in the Grain Belt Brew House to be affected by this proposed use. I want to point out that I think the actual issue to be considered is the use. According to the required findings for conditional use, there are 6. Item number 5, that the conditional use is consistent with the applicable policies of the comprehensive plan. There's been 30 years of history on this corner and in this neighborhood of the city being actively engaged in the planning and the uses that happen here. Our office is one of the beneficiaries of that. In 1997, it went vacant. City took hold of the property. 2002, our office moved into the neighborhood. And the neighborhood has seen significant change because of the active policies and uses that have gone into this area. It's an extraordinarily high visibility site. It is a gateway. I think the architecture that's been done does recognize that. So the issue before us is the use. Is this use consistent with the rest of the development and policies of the neighborhood and the city? Item number 5 is this consistent? That's an interpretive by nature requirement. And again, to help with this, all we have to do is look at how the city and several planning commissions over time have used this area as a gateway, as a visibility, to bring in and introduce uses, open space, and public uses such as the library. Our office is in opposition to this particular use, and we would request that item number 5 be actively reviewed in your consideration. Does this use fit the history of 30 years of policy and active implementation of that policy? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Hofstad?
Good morning. Tony Hofstad, 610 Ramsey Street. My concern and the reason for support of the appeal is, first of all, traffic. There's 27,000 vehicles that pass through this each day. That, you could compare it to what happens on Hennepin and Lyndale, well, there's 30,000. This presents all kinds of, as you know, the issues that may have developed with pedestrians and bikeways, and that has been a major issue there, and it's a major issue here as well, and will continue to be because of the parks that are planned, the regional parks that are planned, so that number should only increase. The reason I bring that up is also there's a county highway 66, which is Broadway 23, which is Marshall Street. The county has not been actually consulted in terms of how and what the traffic impact will be. And as is mentioned earlier, one of the things that happens is that this street, because it is, and it has been mentioned that this is a boulevard, intended boulevard, and you'll note that they want to have parkway features. Parkway features involve bikeways, which is an important part of this. As a member of the Above the Falls Committee and a member of CLIC, I've also worked very hard with bikeways, and the bikeways end at 10th, in the middle of 10th, and don't continue to Broadway. So it becomes an issue, and the issue is to carry this, obviously, throughout the whole boulevard. I think if you look at the congestion, and again, I ask that the county would be consulted, and that in and out retail in this site just doesn't work. There's too much traffic, and there will be increased traffic. I think it's an improper use. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin?
My name is Patrick Griffin. I'm a resident of St. Anthony West. This proposed development calls for a building to be built directly to the property line without a setback. A similar building was proposed at Lowry and Marshall Street Northeast, 2 county roadways, 1 mile from the current site of Lowry and Marshall. The property owner was given a directive by Hennepin County and possibly establishing a precedent that the new building needed to be set back 40 feet. Here's an example. The red line on this map represents a development that is approved and must be set back 40 feet. If this proposal plan is before you is approved, there will be no flexibility for future planning of a safer intersection and safer pedestrian walkways and bikeways. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth Griffin?
Good morning. My name's Beth Griffin. I'm a resident of St. Anthony West. Our neighborhood organization held 3 public meetings where the proposed development was reviewed and discussed. On February 13th, the board of directors voted overwhelmingly, 9-1, not to support this development that's proposed for this location on Marshall Street and Broadway. The board noted several concerns, including traffic, crime, the multitude of current liquor establishments, and this being an unsuitable gateway for the St. Anthony West neighborhood. Thank you very much. I give the rest of my time to Diane Hofstad.
Thank you. I'm just following the list here. So next we have Sheila Burns, or Burnt?
Sheila Biernat. It's okay. I am from Northeast Minneapolis. It's the St. Anthony West neighborhood. I've been a resident there for 26 years. Chair Lisa Bender. Committee members Lisa Goodman, Andrew Johnson, Barbara Johnson, Kevin Reich, Abdi Warsami. I address you by name because we need you to be visionaries. Comprehensively look at this area and realize it's not just another corner lot. This is a significant gateway to our community, our riverfront, with historic significance. Marshall Street is not just another street. It is the Great River Road. It is part of a national scenic byway that connects us to 9 other states which celebrate and integrate the Mississippi River into the legacies of our towns, our cities, our historic sites, and link resources, people, and culture along there. It is dynamic like the river, and it needs to relate to the river. Here's a map. This is a Mississippi River Trail bikeway. The Great River Road enters northeast Minneapolis via East River Road, and it has a direct connection with Weber Parkway, which connects to Victoria Memorial Parkway, both in North Minneapolis. Commuters from north and northeast can enjoy this historic road as they bike downtown. The Great River Road pivots at Broadway, the very intersection we are discussing today, 80 Broadway Street Northeast. It is a pivotal corner. As Mayor Betsy Hodges said, we need a seamless, sustainably interwoven transit investment along revitalized urban corridors as a growing tool for growing jobs, housing, economic development. We need Marshall Parkway to be home to bicyclists, pedestrians, and commuters. We need visionaries who can understand what a difference this one corner makes. Abdi, Andrew, Barbara, Kevin, Lisa, and Lisa, we need you. Please support this appeal.
Thank you. Janet Linius, then Diane Hofstede, and I think it says Scott Hellion.
Good morning. I live at 910 Main Street Northeast, and I own a rental property next door at 916 Main, which is 2 blocks from the proposed liquor store. The reason I don't want a liquor store at Marshall and Broadway, beyond the issue of the way it looks when people come across the river, is the type of people it's going to attract to the neighborhood. I care about this because my 2 daughters, ages 9 and 13, go unaccompanied walking our dog in the neighborhood, and I'm concerned about their quality of life and safety. With 3 bars within 2 blocks of our house, we have the River Liquor Store a mile north, Morado's 1.3 miles to the northeast, and Surdyk's 1.2 miles south. We don't need another liquor store. So how do the liquor store establishments manifest in our day-to-day life? We often see drunks walking down our alley between the Northeast Yacht Club and the 1029 bar. The pedal pubs flaunt public drunkenness up and down Marshall and Main Streets. A few years ago, I saw a couple having sex in the back seat of a parked car on 9th and Marshall. Last summer, my husband saw drug deals going down at 10th and Marshall. On my block last summer, my neighbor was robbed at gunpoint. In conclusion, I urge you, honorable council people, to vote to wait until the St. Anthony West neighborhood completes its small area plan. And this will also give a variety of other businesses an opportunity to step forward with alternative proposals. While the modern roadways business is not aesthetically pleasing, at least it's not liquor related. Don't jump for hastily for shiny new buildings that are ultimately not the type of businesses that are going to make our neighborhood stronger, healthier, or better for our kids to grow up in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hofstede? Then Scott Hellion, Tom Hahn, Kay Christensen, and Chuck Sullivan.
Good morning, Council Member Bender and members of the City Council. I'm Diane Hofstede, 610 Ramsey Street. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the conditional use permit for the proposed liquor store. Conditional use permit, a public hearing is required. And the reason for that is because it allows the city to review the use, which because of its unique characteristics is not permitted as a right of a particular zoning district. The definition of a conditional use permit is allowed if the use will comply with all of the conditions and standards of the zoning ordinance and the zoning code before granting a conditional use permit. And I would suggest that that is just not the case. The reasons we submitted our appeal certainly reinforce that. The conditional use will be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity and will impede the normal and orderly development. And I just wanted to point out, the conditional use permit is required. And the reason for that is because it allows the city to review the use, which because of its unique characteristics is not permitted as a right of a particular zoning district. The definition of a conditional use permit is allowed if the use will comply with all of the conditions and standards of the zoning ordinance and the zoning code before granting a conditional use permit. And I would suggest that that is just not the case. The reasons we submitted our appeal certainly reinforce that. The conditional use will be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the vicinity and will impede the normal and orderly development. This is a multi-year map of all of the development that has happened in the area. It has been very robust development and thoughtful over a 30-year period of time. In addition, the very beginning of your staff report indicates that this is a development for mixed use in an activity center. And clearly, this particular development is not.
Just want to note the time. Thank you.
Thank you. I would also like to note that the pictures as described for this particular development, we think that given what we have observed, really will look more like this. And again, do not see this as a gateway to the city of Minneapolis, heavily used library by our Somali community, members of our community who really enjoy this area in the development.
Thank you very much for your testimony, the time.
And the conflict certainly for pedestrians is obvious. We have a petition that has been signed by affected neighbors, and I will be turning that in to the clerk for your review. In addition, we have 2 letters by members of our community regarding the use of the library and the lack of support of the Friends of the Library, and of course, other elements which have been mentioned.
Thank you very much.
You have all the needs and criteria to reject this. We ask that you reject this proposal.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank
All right,
you.
Scott, Hellion, Tom, Han, I'm sorry, I can't read. Oh, that's you. Perfect. Okay. Then we just have Kay Christensen, Chuck Sullivan. I'll just note we've heard a lot about the bike facilities and other issues, so please keep your remarks to the question at hand as well as new information. Thank you.
Good morning, council members. My name is Kay Christensen, and I am representing the developer, Stephen Scott Management, and the 200-plus new renter residents that will be moving into the grain belt. The apartment's currently under construction in the adjacent Sheridan neighborhood. We are supporting and welcoming the proposed Kraus Liquor Store to the neighborhood as we believe our renter demographic will be comprised of 22 to 35-year-old millennial generation of young professionals and as well as empty nesters. This demographic demands upscale and urban. They like upscale luxury apartments. They like upscale urban conveniences like health food or stores with unique offerings, like Trader Joe's, for example. They also like upscale shopping, and this also means for their drink of choice. They like premium spirits, trendy microbrews, and expensive wines, and they want to do the shopping in a modern, convenient, nice place. They don't walk around drinking out of a brown bag, and they do not desire to shop at a retail liquor store that would attract that type of clientele. We believe the liquor store will cater to our renters and will be a welcomed and necessary service and amenity to their neighborhood. Exactly the type of upscale liquor store catering to the improved look of the neighborhood through modern architecture and a clean, comfortable place to shop, providing them with the upscale beverages they are looking for. We advocate for the approval of the Kraus Liquor Store.
Thank you. We have one more person signed in, Chuck Sullivan.
Good morning. My name is Chuck Sullivan. I live at 3829 Xerxes Avenue South, which is on the other end of the city, but my heritage comes out of Northeast. I'm 4th generation from Northeast Minneapolis. One of the issues that has been talked about is how dense this site will be. And looking at this, I think this is an important thing. The access to this site currently is a very open corner. If you notice on the right-hand side of where Modern Roadways is. And by the way, approval of Modern Roadways was made at some point in time. Now I've heard a lot of bashing of that it's there now. I don't know how it was approved, but it was approved, and now we're regretting that. So I think keeping in mind that the part of this is thinking about the long-term future. One of the issues is that as all of the conflicts that are occurring at that very corner. One of the issues is there's no ability to see around that corner. And I had a couple sketches, but there's no time to really present those. The upshot of this is that it is going to be a dangerous environment. Today's tax day. We have taxes due. The real issue is thousands and thousands and thousands of hours have gone into putting these plans together with both city staff and volunteers from the people using their volunteer time. We're not here. I'm not here to bash the liquor store. I exist here because the Glicks brought my great-grandfather here, so I'm not offended by liquor. What I'm saying is we need to really look at this site and how much of this site has to have conditional changes to a plan that we've already laid in place that allow it to be put on this site. Looking at the site, we've made compromises, and I want to just one more thing. Look at all the possible turning indications that are going to occur. I also sit on Catholic Elder Care's board. The trucks are going to use Main Street. There's no doubt. So, and you have a letter to that effect. This is a complicated site.
Just want to note the time.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Anyone else? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and see if there's any comments or questions from my colleagues. All right. I will actually, to move this along, move that we deny the appeal submitted by Diane Hofstad and on behalf of a group of people, and to allow approval of the conditional use permit and site plan review. Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to amend that on the condition that it meets existing site plan standards and traffic is redirected off of Marshall Street. Those are just two additional conditions. You can take that as a friendly or not.
That sounds fine. Were there specific?
Yeah, basically to comport with existing site plan standards and to redirect traffic off of Marshall Street.
Okay.
And it also recognizes time that, between now and full council vote, they can work with the local aldermen and see if there's any issues beyond that.
Okay, Mr. Wittenberg.
Chair Bender, Councilmember Reich, if I could just clarify if the intent of that added piece to the motion means that there would be no alternative compliance granted from site plan review standards, such as allowing part of the landscaping in the public right-of-way and those kinds of things, or just to clarify for staff's benefit when we are approving final plans?
That is correct, as you stated.
Okay, I'm not sure I fully understand the consequences of that. So if maybe we could continue with the discussion, ask staff for clarification, and I will recognize Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand what Councilmember Reich is saying. There are some of the site plan standards, like using the public right-of-way for landscaping instead of the site itself, that he says he doesn't want to allow them to vary around. Isn't that correct? Is there another one besides the landscaping standard, Councilmember Reich?
No. I specifically called out the redirecting traffic off of Marshall Street.
Perhaps staff could show us the redirecting traffic off of Marshall Street piece of it on the screen. As it pertains to the landscaping requirement, it's very unfortunate not one of the 10 people that stood up mentioned this issue. But I agree with you. I think that the landscaping should be on their property. That might result in one less parking space, but they'd still meet the parking requirement. So I don't think that would be a problem.
And if I just may comment, the spirit of this is that we do in fact have some legal obligations in terms of the use, the C2, and what it allows. However, we're not compelled to accommodate beyond that in terms of the conditions. We set those.
Absolutely. I just wanted to, my question was along the lines of Councilmember Goodman's about the site access, because I know there was discussion with Public Works about where the parking lot entrances and exits were. So I just wanted to make sure that we were consistent with the work that has been done by our traffic engineers to ensure safe access by vehicles to the parking lot.
Public Works has looked at this configuration. They're not opposed to the access from Marshall Street or width of the curb cut or its location. So if no curb cut were allowed on Marshall Street, all the access, both entering and exiting, would occur from 11th Avenue. And they would have to use the intersection of Marshall and 11th. to gain access to the site. Also with not providing landscaping in the 11th Avenue Boulevard and providing that all on site, that means that all the parking spaces would have to be shifted at least 5 feet to the north. So to avoid a parking variance, they'd have to shrink the building.
Did Public Works staff analyze the impacts of eliminating the curb cut on Marshall?
They did not. They've only seen a proposal with 2 curb cuts. They haven't seen one with a single curb cut, and how that would work with maneuvering for trucks.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Frye.
Thank you, Chair Bender. The vast majority of the concerns that I have with the particular use aren't relevant for or related to the conditional use permit. I will comment directly, though, on the issue of entrance and exit. My primary concern with the initial site plan was that there was an entrance and exit right on Broadway, and with the because of the fact that the entrance and exit was immediately adjacent to the intersection itself, I was quite concerned that that plan would cause a significant congestion and would result in people making a left-hand turn across 2 yellow striped lines across 2 lanes of traffic illegally, and then into the liquor store itself, and that would probably be the case whether or not it was legal. People would probably just do it illegally, and so I rejected that idea. And now the present plan, of course, has the curb cut on Marshall Street, and I appreciate Councilmember Reich's idea, which I believe would be to move it to 11th Avenue. My only concern there would be adding additional traffic to the adjacent neighborhood. So I'm certainly open to other ideas there. There are, I think I'll point out for the record that the neighborhood association has firmly opposed this. I think there are varying points of view in the neighborhood itself, and I am keeping my word, which is I told the neighborhood association that I would support whatever decision they made, and they've made their decision clearly, very clearly. And but with respect to this particular plan, I guess I'd just like some additional I don't know necessarily input, but clarification on how this would work practically from perhaps staff. Am I right that this would everything be going through 11th Avenue there?
Yes, if the second curb cut were relocated to 11th Avenue, or just the Marshall Street curb cut were eliminated altogether, all traffic would be funneled to 11th Avenue. So I think it would be reasonable to say that the impact to 11th Avenue would increase.
Right.
And possibly Main Street, yes.
Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Councilmember Frye, I was trying to remember what's on the other side of 11th Avenue there. It just isn't coming to me in my head.
1029.
Is it an apartment building, or is it?
Well,
It's
1029.
1029 is on Marshall, and then
okay.
beyond and behind that is the neighborhood itself,
Okay.
residential.
Okay. And I just wanted to say, actually, that I do remember when the story behind how Thomas Brothers got located on the corner of Broadway and Marshall, and it was because the council member of the ward at the time, I think maybe I don't remember if they changed the zoning or what happened, but that was clearly a inappropriate use at the time, and I don't know if it's still there now, but there used to be like plastic. It has cyclone fence, and there used to be the plastic threaded through the fence. So it's a challenging corner. But I have followed this Marshall Street bike route discussion over the years, and I just find it hard to imagine that we would get to the point, the right-of-way on Marshall is so constricted and filled with businesses and developments that have occurred that I just don't see it's practical that we would think about having bike lanes on Marshall unless you eliminate the parking completely along Marshall. And that just does not seem to me, as a practical person, something that's going to happen long term. So I also would point out that also one of the goals of River First is to have a complete trail along the Mississippi River bank, which is about 2 blocks away. So it would be nice to have Marshall be a parkway as well, but I just don't practically see how that's going to happen long term.
Councilmember Reich, and then Mr. Wittenberg also had a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Given the commentary and with the local council members' comments, I would just allow the flexibility to and encouragement to look into these issues. I take those flow through issues very seriously, and to work through them with the property owner, proposed property owner, and then, but standing firm on the notion of compliance with our existing site plan standards, and with the traffic flow issue, further work can be done between now and full council.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wittenberg?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Bender. And I just want to make sure we're very clear with the committee that the 6 items are noted as needing alternative compliance on pages 9 and 10 of the staff report. And I think that without any alternative compliance, this actually becomes a significantly different project and does not get built nearly as proposed. Perhaps most significantly, to meet our urban design and urban form objectives, we require that buildings be within 8 feet of a front lot line. Well, you've got frontage on three streets in this case. So if you can imagine this site plan changing to for the building to be within 8 feet of each of the street frontages, that's a significantly different project, and actually is more similar to the project that the applicant initially proposed with the curb cut off of Broadway, which was rejected by Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Wittenberg. I was just reviewing the points on pages 9 and 10 myself. So we have building placement and parking location, window requirements, ground floor active functions, general landscaping, landscaped yards for parking abutting a street, and trees along parking lot frontage and distance to trees. So those are the 6 items that you're referring that would each need to be changed in order to meet the original compliance requirements. Is that correct?
That's correct. If we were to not grant alternative compliance for any of those things, each of those would have to be addressed in the revised site plan. And I suspect that the result of compliance with those would mean a trip back to the Planning Commission, because it's just not the same project any longer. I'd be curious if the applicant thinks that they could accommodate those with more or less the project we see in front of us. But
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see absolutely no reason to redo all the work of the Planning Commission. I have strong feelings about the greening requirement. I agree with Councilmember Reich on that. So I'd ask the chair to call the question on Councilmember Reich's motion unless he wants to withdraw it, and then we can vote on the separate greening requirement, which I think there perhaps could be more unanimity around. Want to do that? Okay. Why don't you call the question on Councilmember Reich's amendment?
Okay, so we have an amendment to the motion that would require compliance, it would eliminate alternative compliance and require compliance with the original CUP requirements. Is that the right way to say that? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no? No. It fails. It fails. 3-3, though, yes.
Okay, so move your motion then. We'll see if that passes. Well, make your. Now we know where people are at. So go ahead and make your motion, and
Councilmember
we'll
Reich.
That will be that.
I thought that was the vote we just took, was the amendment, and that failed. Yep.
Okay.
Councilmember Goodman, would you like to make a motion regarding the greening?
I'll move that we deny the appeal, and that, but that, as Councilmember Reich had said, that we require no not allow alternative compliance with regard to the greening issues, and that we ask them not to be using the public right-of-way as alternative compliance on the greening issues, and let the chips fall where they may.
Is there any questions or comments about Councilmember Goodman's motion? Okay, we have a motion to grant the appeal, but to deny the alternative.
Deny the appeal.
To deny the appeal, but to require to disallow alternative compliance for the greening, which is, Mr. Wittenberg, can you tell me which of the 6 points that is, just so we're very clear?
Sure. I would understand that to mean the general landscaping requirement, the landscaped yard requirement, and I assume the trees fronting along the streets.
So that is the final 3 alternative compliance points: general landscaping, landscaped yards for parking abutting a street, and trees along a parking lot frontage and distance to trees. Would staff like to comment about that?
My landscaping plan has disappeared. So we have another. I'll just have to use this one. Thank you. So just to reiterate, 5 feet of the landscaped yard is located within the 11th Avenue right-of-way. Shifting that onto the site would result in the parking being shifted further north. As part of the alternative compliance, they were proposing to do additional trees in the right-of-way along Broadway and Marshall, where there are currently none. There were some additional trees then required in these landscaped yards, one on Marshall. I believe there are a couple more along 11th. So by meeting that, I guess the question I would have is, are these trees on Broadway still required? That was one thing that was offered for alternative compliance. And that the fact that 11th Avenue is, I believe this is width is 12 feet wide, so they still retain a 7-foot wide sidewalk. And we do get trees there where there currently is no landscaping. So that was the trade-off with the alternative compliance.
Chair Bender, if I could just make one comment also about the possible changes to the site plan. I suspect that if the applicant is required to shift their parking lot to the north, the first thing that will be that walkway between the parking lot and the liquor store. So if the committee feels strongly about that staying, which we do encourage through site plan review, the committee might want to weigh in on that.
Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, they can put trees in anyway. No one's preventing them from putting trees in. We're just not saying you don't get a bonus for putting trees in on the right-of-way, which business owners should be doing anyway, in order to, and using public right-of-way in order to achieve their greening requirement. So no one's saying don't put trees in. You're just not getting extra credit for putting trees in one location because you're not putting them in another. So isn't that correct, Mr. Wittenberg? No, we're not saying don't put trees in. We're saying put trees in and comply with our parking lot greening requirement. And I would think Councilmember Frye would agree with that, since we've been talking endlessly about not having surface parking lots, more or less greening surface parking lots. And if the trade-off is that they don't have the walkway, then they don't have the walkway because they get more green on the neighbor's side.
That's correct. I think Ms. Widmeyer's point was that our leverage for requiring those street trees was that we were having some flexibility regarding on-site landscaping.
Madam Chair, Mr. Wittenberg, we don't need any leverage. If they want to be jerks and not put the trees in, they won't put the trees in, but they're not going to get credit for it for not doing something somewhere else.
Councilmember Reich.
To extend or expatiate on the thought forwarded by Councilmember Goodman. Yeah, the leverage is there's a marketplace, and they're already kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of having the immediate marketplace not too happy. This would be a good gesture, getting them in the right direction if they can find the will to do so.
Okay, any further comments or discussion? All right, then I will call the question on the motion, which is to deny the appeal, but to require to not allow alternative compliance for the last three items. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, nay? Nay. That motion carries. Okay, anything else for today's agenda? With that, our meeting is adjourned.